Hello team and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pitts. Ukraine War News Update for the 20th of October 2023. We're going to go to the military aid segment first, as we normally do for this second video. Joe Biden has said that, he is seeking $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel. Just a little conversation about this, and actually we're going to return to this a little bit later because Biden had what I think was an excellent speech last night about Hamas and about Ukraine, Israel and Ukraine. And I thought, particularly on Ukraine, did a really good job and referred a lot to some of the things that I've been asking for the Biden administration to do, which is clarity over funding and the rationale for helping Ukraine. There's not been enough of that. Now, I hope it just cuts through the information mess to get to particularly to the American public. Anyway, on this, US President Joe Biden will ask Congress for $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, said a source familiar with his plan. The request will also include $10 billion for humanitarian aid and $14 billion for border security, $7 billion for the Indo-Pacific region. So this is packing everything up into one package, including border security. So all the things that many people with differing agendas want, you put it all in one, then because they all want part of that, it's got more chance of getting through as a whole. And I think that's quite clever. The only problem is, of course, the GOP is having a nightmare in trying to elect a speaker for the majority House of Representatives. It's a problem in trying to get anything through. Congress is at a standstill effectively, and that needs to happen as soon as possible. But if they keep choosing people like Jim Jordan, who, I mean, goodness me, politically he's diametrically opposed, but man, how can people try and celebrate, validate someone who is got the history he has with covering up sexual abuse in Ohio State University and all that? Anyway, I don't want to go down that rabbit hole, but just he's a big problem, and he's not going to be good for Ukraine. Well, it looks like he's not going to get in, so they need to go to the drawing board and select someone else. They need someone who can have universal appeal, but it seems that the GOP is so divided into factions now, in terms of like the MAGA faction and the old kind of Reaganite faction and fiscal conservatives that aren't so strong on like social issues, that no one can agree on who they want to kind of represent them in the House of Representatives. So yeah, it's a real problem because this won't get done. Anyway, half of the $60 billion Biden is requesting for Ukraine, this is the important part, would go toward replacing and modernizing US weapons stocks, the source said. And this comes out in what Biden says in his speech. We will return to this idea, but just to remind you, the basics of it is that a lot of the money for Ukraine is actually about upgrading the US military. So it's like, right, we're going to give Ukraine all of this stuff, and that means we need to replace it by buying all of this much better stuff. So the money that's being spent on Ukraine isn't really being spent on Ukraine. It's being spent on upgrading the US military under the guise of aid for Ukraine. And the old stuff then gets given to Ukraine. And the end result is that Ukraine gets kit, and so it can fight a war and hopefully win a war against Russia. So strategic gains for the US. But B, the US is in a much better military position because it's got a load of upgraded kit that it otherwise wouldn't have had this quickly, right? So then that puts the US in a much better geopolitical military position, strategic position going forward. You know, when you're looking at issues that might bubble over in Taiwan, US has suddenly got a lot of better kit. This is, it's not this zero-sum game of like, oh, we give the Ukraine a bunch of stuff, which means we don't have it, or in some kind of way, either money for education or military equipment. It's like, we give stuff to Ukraine and we get better stuff. So gain, win-win, positive sum game. Anyway. Time to rant. Ukraine and the US have agreed on the continuous supply of long-range ATACMS. Well, that was a quick test, wasn't it? Here are 20 ATACMS, as according to news reports. They fire off 5. They're really successful. Take out 2 air bases. The US are like, yeah, I think we can give you some more. Yeah, but we can test some more. Like, it's only the next day. No, that's fine. Yeah, go for it. This is really good news. So that's what their Foreign Minister Kuleba has said. The minister also expressed hope that in the future, US will provide ATACMS to the range of 300 kilometers. So at the moment, they appear to have the they have the one with with more bomblets, but with less range. Fewer, more sub munitions, but only to about 165 kilometers. They can give the A1 variant, M39A1 variant, that can fire to 300 kilometers, but it does have fewer submunitions. So there is this trade-off that you have there. But goodness me, all of it's great, and if they get continuous provision of these, then that is going to be very useful for the Ukrainians. Germany prepares a winter assistance package for Ukraine, said Chancellor Olaf Scholz, and we'll be returning to him in a little while. During a speech in the Bundestag, that's the German parliament, the package would include, quote, everything needed for air defense to protect Ukraine from Russian missile attacks. So Ukraine will be in such a better position this winter than they were last winter. This is what I talk about, the constant upgrading of Ukraine. This is really bloody important, right? They're getting constantly upgraded. The amount of stuff they've been given over time, their air defenses are hugely more sufficient than they were 1 year ago. And 1 year ago, they had an attempt to cripple their energy infrastructure, which partially worked, but actually in the end, Russia were unable to properly cripple Ukraine. Now, a year later, Russia will have fewer missiles to send, I would think. And Ukraine has much, much better air defense systems, some of the best in the world. And as the months go by, Ukraine will be receiving more and more Patriots. They've got 5 to be delivered from Raytheon that they are buying. But also, we've got, I think, Olaf Scholz possibly giving Patriots extra Patriot stuff as well, and other countries giving NASAMS and Hawks and this and that. They're just there's this focus on air defense that will put Ukraine in a much better place than they were. This then gives them a basis to concern themselves. Then, if you're safe behind your lines and in protecting your cities, then you can focus a lot more on achieving more with your frontline activities. It's just Ukraine are gaining, Russia are being degraded. I mean, you look at the figures from this morning. It's so significant to point this out. UK and partners are implementing a £127 million winter emergency assistance plan for Ukraine. So again, part of that idea of like sorting them out for the winter. This was announced by senior military advisor to the British delegation to the OSCE. That's obviously good news there. Actually, let's go and have a look and see if I can find some details on that. Yeah, trying to make sense of this actually. So the Flash says UK and partners, so that's UK and others, are implementing 127 million winter emergency assistance plan. It seems to come from this source here, babel.ua. UK and partners are launching 127 million pound winter emergency assistance plan for Ukraine. According to the advisor, UK will continue to support Ukraine diplomatically, militarily, and financially. And yeah, so I don't know. There is interesting stuff about what Ukraine are doing to shore up their nuclear reactors and all sorts there. There is a £127 million plan, the Ukraine Emergency Winter Preparedness Plan. This is going back to, that's the 18th of October 2023. So that is the recent one. With international partners, last week, the British Defence Secretary announced a new package of support totaling £100 million to help Ukraine clear minefields and protect critical national infrastructure. So what I'm trying to do is find information on what this actually is, Ukraine Emergency Winter Preparedness Plan, but I can't at the moment find any details on that. So yeah, we'll have to wait and see what details come out concerning that and what it pertains to. Right, moving on. Croatia has transferred all of its Mi-8 helicopters. This is something that they had announced previously and then announced more of them as well, if I remember correctly. And now there's a transcript that shows that all of them have gone, all of the Croatians' Mi-8 helicopters have gone to Ukraine now. That's a transcript from the US Department of Defense from a meeting between Lloyd Austin and the Croatian defense minister. So that's really good news, and they will be useful for the Ukrainians. I mentioned this radio system before, the Chimera one. While the US portable army radios cost around $15,000 to $16,000, the price of a Chimera G1 developed by a small Ukrainian team is at just over $100. Chimera radios are not jammed by Russian electronic warfare, no special programming tools required, and configured via a smartphone. Super useful. That excellent. That's what you need, are these indigenous, innovative productions from the Ukrainians themselves. Right, this I'll probably do this in an extra. I always say that, and just time. I need more time. I need to invent a machine where I sleep for 10 minutes and gives me a full night's sleep. That'd be good. Right. Here is a nice little interview with a Ukrainian crew on a Swedish version of the Leopard 2 tank that is up in the Liman direction. The few bits to pick out of this that I want to just talk about for the purpose of my news piece is that they've been giving these, so that's military aid, that's really good. What are they getting with these? Well, the ability, according to this guy, to hit aerial targets with the tank at a range of I can't remember, is it 15? It doesn't seem to want to forward wind on here, so bear with me a second. Yeah, the player is not playing ball, but basically there's a few things to mention. That they can take down a helicopter at a range of 11 kilometers with the use of the arrow that they can shoot out, which is an armor-piercing round that has 70 centimeters of armor-piercing capability. 70 centimeters of armor, I mean, hugely effective. It's got quite a lot of space. They can actually sleep in the tank. There's some of the Russian tanks we've seen and other tanks which are really, really cramped. Relatively spacious. It's got ammo rack on the back that when it explodes, it ejects out of the back and it is protective. And actually the back is less vulnerable because this tank can reverse at 30 kilometers an hour. I can't tell you how important that is. So some of the Russian tanks can only have a reversing speed. I think T-72 is it, or is it T-80? Reverses at 5 kilometers an hour, which means that if you get into trouble, you can't reverse and get out there quickly. You start reversing, you're going as fast as someone can walk. But what happens is the tanks then turn around and drive back to get out there more quickly. But then most of your armor is on the front. If you stand with your hands going at sort of 60, 70 degrees like that, that's where most of your armor is going to be, because that's where most of the threats are going to come in. So they put heavy armor at the front and the front sides, and then your back has got far less armor. So it means if you turn the tank around, you are offering the weakest part of your tank underneath as well. And in fact, on top, have top-down munitions now. But obviously the problems with things like first-person view drones means that they can just fly around and hit you from the rear. But when you're going into like a battle where there are probably going to be fewer first-person view drones at the moment, I can imagine that you might start seeing these being brought to bear in the midst of a heavy battle, rather than just by operators going and hitting things 10 kilometers behind the front line or whatever. But nonetheless, if you can reverse at 30 kilometers an hour, that is a massive advantage over some of the other tanks that they have been using. So yeah, lots of information from that. Really good little interview, but it's like me skipping through it. Right, Iran is reportedly providing Russia with anti-drone radars in addition to the kamikaze drones it has already been providing. Ironically, the radars are said to have been designed by Iran by a Russian engineer after Russia had declined to develop it itself. This is interesting. So according to a Russian Telegram channel, quote, Iran is currently supplying Russia with its radar systems for detecting and combating low observable flying vehicles, drones. It turned out that the Russian military-industrial complex and the armed forces do not produce and do not possess the required number of systems that could successfully counter low observable targets. The Russian Telegram channel says that, according to a source, the decision was made to purchase the necessary radars from Iran. It doesn't say what kind of radars they are, but it's likely that they're the Shahid Jalilvand systems pictured here during a recent Iranian exercise. The Shahid Jalilvand medium-range phased array radar system was publicly revealed on Iran's National Army Day on 18th of April 2023. It's been in operational use for the first time in Iran's 1402 joint drone exercise that began on the 3rd of October. The Fars news agency reported that it offered 3D target detection, tactical capability for rapid reaction operations, long endurance, and utilization of modern techniques for precise angle measurement and anti-electronic warfare equipment. However, according to the channel, the Iranian radars being provided to Russia were actually designed by a Russian and Soviet scientist and engineer named Efir Shustov, who was one of the developers of the Duga over-the-horizon radar pictured near Chernobyl in Ukraine. The channel reports that Iran recruited him to develop a radar to detect low observable targets, spy drones and attack drones presumably being operated by the US and Israel, and the Russian government declined to fund his work in that area. It reports the Research Institute of Long-Range Radar, NIDAR, where Shustov worked and where radio-technical complexes were developed, became unnecessary, and later it was picked up by the AFK Sistema and merged into the holding company RTI, where it's safely buried. And the land where the Research Institute was located in the area of Preobrazhenskaya Square in Moscow was used for the construction of housing and business class offices. The decision to close down the NIDAR and abandon development of radars to detect low observable targets meant that Russia has been unable to counter Ukraine's use of long-range kamikaze drones. Now the channel says it is having to buy back the technology from Iran. This is a cautionary tale about outsourcing, about, or, you know, yeah, we don't need that, we don't need to make it. Yeah, you can go off and work for Iran. Oh, no, we do need that now, actually. We need to bring that back in-house. Oh, we can't. We demolished a building. Okay. We'll just buy it back from Iran. There you go. The head of the Russian Investigative Committee, Bastrykin, proposed depriving migrants of Russian citizenship if they refuse to fight in Ukraine. This is trying to get this crypto mobilization done. And one of the ways they can get mobilized troops, boots on the ground in Ukraine without causing too much of an upset to the voting public is by getting migrants to do that the heavy lifting there. So both illegal and legal, we've seen them being rounded up, and you're not allowed your status in Russia, your Russian citizenship, if you refuse to go to war. You want to come here for your citizenship? Okay, we'll give that to you. And by the way, you also get this envelope, which is the request for you. And by request, it means command for you to go and fight on the front lines in Ukraine. And yeah, that seems to be what they're doing, which is unsurprising. Right, we're going on to geopolitical topics now, and we'll come back to Biden. So Biden, as I said, I think was pretty strong. This is an excerpt of what he said.
Hamas and Putin represent different threats, but they share this in common. They both want to completely annihilate a neighboring democracy, completely annihilate it. So if we don't stop Putin's appetite for power and control in Ukraine, he won't limit himself just to Ukraine.
So we're starting to hear of some of the rationale for why the US is strategically invested in supporting Ukraine. Okay, so here's a transcript of what Biden said in his big old speech last night. And I think this is important. So this is as it pertains to Ukraine. On Ukraine, I'm asking Congress to make sure we continue to send Ukraine the weapons they need to defend themselves and their country without interruption, so Ukraine can stop Putin's brutality in Ukraine. They are succeeding. When Putin invaded Ukraine, he thought he would take Kyiv and all of Ukraine in a matter of days. Well, over a year later, Putin has failed, and he continues to fail. Kiev still stands because the bravery of the Ukrainian people. Ukraine has regained more than 50% of the territory Russian troops once occupied, backed by a US-led coalition of more than 50 countries around the world, all doing its part to support Kiev. What would happen if we walked away? We are the essential nation. Meanwhile, Putin has turned to Iran and North Korea to buy attack drones and ammunition to terrorize Ukrainian cities and people. From the outset, I've said I will not send American troops to fight in Ukraine. So again, he's trying to hit on some of these talking points. So why it's important, Russia then getting together with Iran and North Korea. So, these are obvious bad guys in US cultural and political history. And Russia, who are those as well, are getting together with these guys. This is like an axis of evil. I'm communicating, I'm basically explaining his tactics here. So he's communicating this kind of axis of evil to the American public and then saying, from the outset, I said this, but I'm going to repeat it now. We're not sending American troops to fight in Ukraine. There will be no boots on the ground here. All Ukraine is asking for is help. For the weapons, munitions, the capacity, the capability to push invading Russian forces off their land, and the air defense system to shoot down Russian missiles before they destroy Ukrainian cities. But this is also saying we are there to protect civilians from dying as much as giving them the military edge on the battlefield. But then he goes, let us be clear about something. And this is what we have been missing for a year and a half. Okay? Just the clarity here. We send Ukraine equipment. So he said, look, we're going to send them equipment, right? And now I know what your talking point is going to be. What about all this money we're sending them? Blah, 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 blah. Okay. We send Ukraine equipment sitting in our stockpiles. And when we use the money allocated by Congress, we use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles with new equipment, which is what Reuters said, right? That Reuters article I went through in the beginning of the military aid section. This is it. This is Biden saying it very clearly. We use it to replenish our own stores, our own stockpiles with new equipment, equipment that defends America and is made in America. So now he's making the economic, he's made the strategic argument. He's made the not money just going out of US and into Ukraine. It's old equipment going to Ukraine that we're replacing with new equipment. So we are in a better strategic and military position. And he's going to make the economic argument, which is made in America. This equipment defends America and it's made in America. This then goes to all your kind of patriotic, nationalist type naysayers to helping to defend Ukraine. Like, what about us? What about US? Well, this is for the strategic benefit and economic benefit of the US. He continues, Patriot missiles for air defense batteries made in Arizona. Artillery shells manufactured in 12 states across the country, in Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and so much more. Hitting those people from those areas going, oh, right, yeah, okay, we're benefiting from the aid that we are giving to Ukraine. Just as in World War II, so then he's going back to, what you guys always shout about, all those films that have been made about how America saved Europe and there were knights in shining armor that came across a pond to win World War II. Well, I'm going to play on that. Just as in World War II, today patriotic American workers are building the arsenal of democracy. And it's that phrase, that famous phrase, it's such a good phrase. Building the arsenal of democracy, serving the cause of freedom. So it's like, this is us. We are the good guys. We're saving the world type thing. That's the kind of rhetoric you need to convince the naysayers in the US. I think this is absolutely superb. Now, whether anyone actually hears this is another question. This speech needs to be front and center, thrown out to the American public on all the news stations. That is really significant, and it's exactly the right thing to say. It's just like a year late, and that's frustrating. Zelensky's talked to Biden, had a conversation, says Zelensky, with US President Joe Biden, thanked him for the effective implementation of our recent defense agreements. Ukrainians were very inspired by receiving ATACMS missiles, and our soldiers successfully used them on the battlefield. We discussed the further strengthening of our long-range capabilities. I also thanked for the fruitful visit of the US Special Representative Penny Pritzker, who I talked about previously, during which we started productive negotiations on ways to use frozen Russian assets. So she's one involved in the rebuilding of Ukraine economically and structurally. Informed about the recent law on politically significant persons adopted by the Ukrainian parliament to promote reforms and start negotiations on joining the EU. Noted Joe Biden's visit to Israel to seek peace and protect civilian lives. We also discussed the next joint steps in the promotion of peace formula. I welcome the decision of the US to send a representative to the next meeting of the advisors in Malta later this month. Ukraine is grateful for the vital and steady support from the US in our fight for freedom and against Russian aggression. Good stuff there. Now, meanwhile, Putin has been, as I've told you, in China. I think Xi wanted to send a strong signal to Putin, says Glasnost. This is brilliant. I don't know if this is a complete mistake or whether it's some world-class trolling of China on Russia. But, yeah, who knows? But I'm going to say it anyway. So in China yesterday, Putin made a speech with a yellow and blue background, Ukraine's flag, that the Russians absolutely hate those colours together these days, and stood in front of a coffin-shaped podium adorned with flowers. Hashtag Russia is losing. This is fairly significant. I mean, look at that background behind him. I mean, either you are completely ignorant of the design of that, and you don't understand the power of those colours, with regard to Russia, but just anyway, everyone seems to know those colours now as representing Ukraine. So either you are deeply, deeply ignorant, or you're not ignorant. And if you're not ignorant, you are trolling. There's, like, someone is trolling here. Or is just really ignorant. But that is very clear Ukrainian colours. I think, yeah, I think there's something in this. But yeah, I don't know what you guys think. But anyway, he does seem to be talking from behind a coffin with a wreath on it, some kind of floral decoration. Right, moving on. Sergei Lavrov: Russian citizens should choose North Korea for tourist trips and vacations. You know you've made the wrong decision in the course of your country going forward when you are advocating that your population goes on holiday more to North Korea. Just, what are you doing? Putin signed into law Russia's denunciation of the Council of Europe's Framework Convention for the Protection of National Minorities. Hashtag, what are you doing? Again. Right. Like, here's some legislation to protect minorities. It's about being inclusive. It's about, seems pretty much morally safe. Oh no, we're going to not do that. We're going to go out of our way to say we are not going to protect national minorities. Well, I don't know what that says about people from Buryatia, from the eastern regions of Russia, but I'm not sure Putin has your best interests at heart. Right, this has been going pretty much viral. So this is Amir Weitman, a powerful member of Netanyahu's Likud party in Israel, went live on Russia Today, and oh boy, tore into Russia's stance. I was only waiting for him to step through the screen. What an epic statement. This is exactly what will resonate in Moscow, especially with Putin. So, what was said?
People to understand that, and I get, with all due respect, that I understand you're under Russian payroll, and I understand this is a Russian propaganda, but you have to be very careful, because let me tell you, we're going to finish this war. We're going to win because we're stronger. After this, Russia will pay the price. Believe me, Russia will pay the price. Russia is supporting the enemies of Israel. Russia is supporting Nazi people who want to commit genocide on us, and just Russia will pay the price. Russia also. Now, listen to me very carefully. We are going to finish with these Nazis. We're going to win this war. It's going to take the time it's going to take, but we're going to win this war. Afterwards, we're not forgetting what you are doing. We're not forgetting. We will come. We will make sure that Ukraine wins. We will make sure that you pay the price for what you have done. You as Russia, and you and as all the enemies of Israel, and you as all the people who are now making everything they can to support genocide of the Jews in Israel. We are not forgetting. We are not forgetting. Remember exactly what I'm saying now. You will pay the price.
Amir, I think it's safe to say that this is a very passionate conflict that is happening here.
Well, people have been massacred. My people has been slaughtered by your proxies, and you will pay the price. Is it clear? Believe me, you will regret
I
this
don't
thing.
actually
You will
think it
regret
is clear.
very, very, very sternly. And if you are not
Just insanely good in one sense. There's a whole host of problems to do with the Israel-Palestine conflict, and go and check out my 3-hour live conversation with my friend Derek Lambert about that. Just click on the live tab below. There are huge amounts of problems concerning that, but from just the Ukrainian point of view, now this is the Likud party, Netanyahu, kind of right-wing party that has been, interestingly, historically very reticent to stand against Russia, because they understand that Russia holds keys in Syria that are important for Israel to be able to do their things against certain targets. And there's considerations with Iran, and it's all very delicate. And that's, I think, largely why Israel have not supported Ukraine very much. But it seems to have become clearer that Russia have funded and trained Hamas to some degree. And Hamas have done some truly horrific things. And I've seen some videos of stuff. I've seen even more. I watched some things last night which were the single worst things I've ever seen in my entire life. And I don't think I can unsee them. Don't look into the abyss, because the abyss will look into you. But sometimes it's useful to understand quite why the Israelis in this case are so angry. But then they're doing things that are not going to help them going forward. So it's just a big hot mess, as I've said many times. But they are hurting because of some of those truly disgusting things Hamas have done. And they see the connection of Hamas to Russia. And you can see the anger from this guy. He's connected the dots. And we're coming for you. I mean, we are coming for you. And Israel have some very useful military technology. They have some great capabilities. Yes, they're getting assistance from the US, but that's going to be more in terms of not capabilities, but just capacity of stuff. We need some ammunition. So some of the ammunition that was apparently going to go to Ukraine that was in Israel is going to be redirected back to Israel or whatnot. So there is that. But there is this dynamic that could be problematic going forward. I'll store that for a second. This is Israel finally taking sides in the Ukraine conflict. And Ukraine must be looking at this going, oh, damn, thank you very much. We'll have some of that, thank you. But once you finish over there, we'll definitely need some help over here. Now, the flip side, what I was storing there, the flip side is that actually the Israel-Palestine conflict is becoming so divisive, even in places like the US and in Europe, it's so divisive because people recognize that Palestine do have a right to freedom, but the problem is Hamas are like the wrong people to do that, but that's all getting mixed up, and it's almost like people are justifying Hamas's actions on the larger intentions of Palestinians. The point is that there's a growing movement against Israel from within a number of allied countries to Ukraine, but also in the Arabic world and in the Middle East. So that actually Israel coming to the help of Ukraine might then, like, the enemy of my enemy is my friend, or the, if my enemy is becoming a friend with someone else, then I shouldn't be a friend with them. So it might be that Israel decided to help Ukraine might then turn off other people. So I've got some sources that I use on Twitter. One particular source who was from the Middle East, but has been reporting hugely on Ukraine, has been massively pro-Ukraine. And since the Israel-Palestine conflict has flared up, he has gone completely to that conflict and is now using people like Jackson Hinkle and Scott Ritter, who are making comments that are anti-Israeli, and using those sources to express his anti-Israeli stance, which is really interesting because those are the sources he would otherwise have been absolutely damning for their defense of Russia against Ukraine. So you've got someone who's been kind of compromised in the way that they are approaching fact finding due to the nature of the Israel-Palestine conflict and how that that's a whole hot mess, and it can affect people in many different ways, is kind of what I'm saying. And that can include countries. Countries are made up of people, governments are people. So it could be that where certain countries are supporting Ukraine, if Israel were to go all in support of Ukraine, other countries who don't support Israel might take a step back. I don't know. This is completely my speculation, but this is all very, very interesting. And that's a fascinating volte-face there from Israel to be so open and explicit in where they think Russia stand here. How much of the Russian population get to see that because it's RT Moscow, but it's in English? Probably very few people, and I'm sure they won't be re-showing that clip. But man, that's fascinating. Right. Along the similar sort of lines, Dr. Anat Hochberg-Marum, geopolitical analyst and researcher on a Israeli TV station, says this murderous Hamas terrorist attack could only have been carried out with the help of Russia, be it funding, training, or direct military assistance in the form of drones, weapons, etc. So that then goes back to what we've just heard. There's this growing understanding in Israel, or at least if the understanding was there before, it's now being explicitly communicated much more, that Russia are involved in that conflict quite directly. And then we see this, as Tim White posting this, guess who hosts the Hamas website? Russia, of course. It's stuff like join the dots. We always talk about follow the money, but it's these little things. Follow these paper trails, or in this case, internet trails. VD Sina, whose office is located in Moscow, surprise, surprise, provides a service for the Hamas website. Make of that what you will. Right, I said I'll return to Olaf Scholz. He blasts Putin's hypocrisy. So here's another example of being far more explicit in what people believe in the top echelons of politics. He calls remarks on civilian casualties cynical. Quote, I'm more than outraged. Doesn't get more cynical than that, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz said. So this is good. What you want, what someone like myself, who is someone like me who is very pro-Ukrainian, morally and politically speaking, you want everyone to be that, and you want it to be so obvious that people like Scholz can be as brazen as this. And you want to get to a point where Putin has so little respect in the international community that people can dismiss him out of hand. No longer are we pussyfooting around going, oh, should I say that about Putin because we might have some ramifications. Germany's like, screw you, we're not using your hydrocarbons anymore. We'll get onto that. We're not using your hydrocarbons effectively anymore. We've cut off from the use of your gas, etc., and oil, and we're not beholden to you. So therefore, screw you. You said something that's morally reprehensible. Screw you. And I'm not afraid to say that in public, Putin, because at the moment you ain't got no friends but North Korea and Iran, and even China seems to be, trolling you or whatever. Having said that, so that's really good, and I'd like him to then transform that into giving Taurus missiles. But then Bloomberg is reporting that Germany still trades Russian LNG as cancelling would cost over $10 billion. A German state-owned company continues to ship Russian liquefied natural gas LNG to India, as cancelling the contract could cost over $10 billion in taxpayers' money, Bloomberg has reported. SEFE, a former unit of the Russian Gazprom nationalised by the German government last year, reportedly continues to fulfil its legacy 20-year contract from 2018 to ship out Russian LNG from the Yamal facility. Now, this is, on the face of it, that's bad. But I do understand this, right? There will be compromises. There will be times, and we've seen this, and you can understand why Germany were worried initially, because this has ramifications for your citizens, right? If you say, right, this is the moral dilemma this is a moral issue over here, but if we do everything we can to side with one side that we think is good and proper and right in this conflict. I just need to let you know that it's going to cost you out of your pocket like $1,000 or something like that. Then it becomes difficult. So if they have a contract that, I don't know if the contract can be invalidated, I don't know enough, but if it's going to cost $10 billion, you're saying to your country, look, we can shut down this LNG supply, but we need to get it from somewhere else, which is probably going to cost us more. So there'll be an increased cost in supply of LNG. But also, assuming that this is LNG that ends up going to Germany as an end destination. But also, the cutting of that contract will cost us $10 billion. And that's $10 billion that won't be, I mean, it is a zero-sum game. That's $10 billion that will be picked up by the taxpayer, which means that is hospitals, education, sports facilities, whatever it is, that's $10 billion that we all have to pick up. So I do understand why something like this maintains. The best result would be if it can be legally annulled in some sense. But be interesting to see what comes of that. Kazakhstan has banned the export of Russia of 106 types of high-tech goods that can be used in the war against Ukraine. This was announced by Vice Minister of Trade and Integration Kairat Torebiev. Drones, electric chips, and microelectronics fell under the ban due to Western sanctions. This is brilliant. This is Kazakhstan saying, "Yeah, we'll do we'll fulfill the bans." Now we know that the Eurasian leaders met with Biden in when there was a big UN meeting recently in New York, and that took place. And this is why Putin is now being much nicer about the Eurasian regions and trying to court them. And of course, they're going to be playing for leverage. They'll be playing for gains and possibly talking out both sides of their mouths. But here they are saying, yes, we will fulfill sanctions. Now, you can imagine there'll be a sweetener for Kazakhstan here coming from the US or the EU or both or whatever. But this is really good because the end game here is crippling the Russian ability to create weapons of war. And then we've had Olena Zelenska, so Zelensky's wife, meeting representatives of Google in Kiev. I find this really intriguing and voiced several wishes of the Ukrainian authorities. This is the battle of the information space, right? I talk a lot. I've just written an article. I'll speak about them in two ticks, but like the battlefield in the information space is raging. Right, and this is part of it, and this is Ukraine trying to fight against Russia in their own way here. So they are asking that Google display Crimea as a territory of Ukraine for all users of Google Maps. Now Crimea is shown as part of Russia for Russians, for Europeans as disputed territory. So depending on where Google is showing their maps, they will show it differently. De-Russification of search results in Google and recommendations on YouTube. So again, having positive algorithms that better support Ukraine's moral project rather than, you go down these rabbit holes. If you go and watch Scott Ritter and then Jackson Hinkle and then you end up in this whole Russified world. Internet world. They're asking to disconnect Ukraine from the geographical membership of the CIS, change automatic delivery of Russian language content for users from Ukraine and Ukrainian IP addresses to Ukrainian. So Ukrainian becomes a default language set for those areas, which seems pretty natural to me, and Western products. Interesting. So yeah, let me know what you think about all of that. And just to let you know, I have written 2 articles. I know it's on the Israel Palestine conflict, but actually there are links to Russia, and I talk about what I've picked up in looking at similar sorts of disinformation claims in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. So my first one was, I wrote one on Musk, if you want to read that, but beheaded babies, a horrific atrocity or propaganda. I talked about how Israel were capitalizing on propaganda to dehumanize Palestinians, and then the latest one is Hamas and pro-Hamas movement capitalizing on disinformation, on spreading disinformation about the hospital that was recently hit, and I do an analysis on that to see whether it was indeed an Israeli strike or whether it was a misfiring Hamas or Palestinian Jihad rocket, Islamic Jihad rocket, firing from Gaza, and I conclude that it came from Gaza, the rocket, from my own analysis, drawing on a synthesis of everyone else's open source analyses, as well as intelligence analyses too. So go and check that out. It's a fairly substantive article on that. I'll be interested to know what you think. I'll probably put it up on as a post. Anyway, thank you. That's a long one for me. Please take care. I'll speak to you soon. Doodle pips.